Dawn Morgan clutched her twin babies closer to her chest as the last passenger disembarked from the train, the reality of abandonment settling over her like the dust that swirled across the empty platform of Willow Creek Station. Her husband of barely a year had promised to meet her here, in this frontier town in Wyoming territory. But as the station clock struck 4 in the afternoon on this sweltering July day in 1879, she knew with devastating certainty that Thomas Morgan had never intended for her to find him. The conductor had already given her pitying glances as he helped her down from the passenger car with her 6-month-old twins, Robert and Rebecca, bundled in her arms. Now he tipped his hat awkwardly as he climbed back aboard. "Madam, we're pulling out. Are you certain you'll be all right?" He asked, concern etching his weathered face. Dawn forced a smile, unwilling to reveal the panic fluttering in her chest. "Yes, thank you. I'm certain my husband has just been delayed." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Thomas's last letter had been strangely brief, with directions to this remote station and a vague promise of a new beginning. Now she understood why. After gambling away their savings in St. Louis and leaving her destitute, he had simply disappeared, leaving her to follow a false trail westward. The train whistle blew, harsh and final. Dawn watched as the locomotive pulled away, black smoke billowing against the vast blue Wyoming sky. The twins began to fuss, hungry and overheated. She moved to the small wooden bench beneath the station's narrow overhang, the only shade available in the merciless afternoon sun. "It's all right, my darlings," she whispered, her voice breaking as she rocked them gently. "Mama will figure something out." But what? She had spent nearly all her remaining money on the train tickets, believing Thomas's promises of a homestead waiting for them. All she possessed was a small carpet bag containing baby clothes, a few personal items, and less than $5 to her name. The station agent, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, eyed her with increasing discomfort from his window. As the sun began its slow descent, he finally emerged, locking the door behind him. "Station's closing, madam. Your husband not coming." His tone suggested he already knew the answer. Dawn swallowed hard. "He appears to have been delayed." The station agent scratched his head. "Town's 3 miles that way," he said, pointing west along a dusty road. "There's a boarding house, but—" His eyes drifted to the twins, and Dawn understood. A young woman with 2 infants would not be welcome everywhere. "Thank you," she said with as much dignity as she could muster, though panic threatened to overwhelm her. How would she walk 3 miles in the heat with 2 babies and her bag? The station agent departed on a mule, looking back once with something like guilt before disappearing down the road. Dawn was truly alone now, the vast Wyoming landscape stretching in every direction, indifferent to her plight. An hour passed. The twins were crying now, hungry and uncomfortable. Dawn had fed them what little milk she had managed to keep cool during the journey, but it wouldn't last much longer. Tears of frustration and fear burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Her babies needed her strength, not her despair. The sound of wagon wheels and hoofbeats broke the silence. Dawn looked up, hope and wariness battling within her. A wagon appeared on the horizon, drawn by 2 sturdy horses. As it drew closer, she could make out the figure of a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The wagon slowed as it approached the station, and the man brought it to a halt near the platform. He was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps 30, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His clothes were worn but clean canvas pants, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms, and a leather vest. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat. His voice was deep but gentle. "Station's closed for the day." "Yes, I know," Dawn replied, trying to quiet Rebecca, who had begun wailing again. "I'm waiting." The man's keen eyes took in the scene, her travel-worn appearance, the 2 crying infants, the single bag at her feet, the distinct absence of anyone coming to meet her. His expression softened with understanding. "Waiting for someone who ain't coming?" he asked, not unkindly. Dawn's pride warred with her desperate situation. Finally, she nodded, a single tear escaping despite her resolve. "My husband," He was supposed to meet us here. We've come from St. Louis. The man stepped down from the wagon, moving with the easy grace of someone accustomed to physical labor. He approached slowly, as if trying not to frighten her. "Name's Reese Hartley," he said. "Got a ranch about 5 miles from town. I don't mean to pry, madam, but it'll be dark soon, and this ain't no place for you and your little ones." Dawn hesitated. Her mother had warned her about the dangers of the frontier, about desperate men and vulnerable women. But the alternative was spending the night alone at an abandoned train station with 2 hungry infants. "I'm Dawn Morgan," she said finally. "These are my children, Robert and Rebecca." She met his gaze directly. "Mr. Hartley, I don't wish to impose, but is there a town nearby where I might find accommodations?" Reese nodded, his expression grave. "Willow Creek's about 3 miles west. Got a hotel and a boarding house, though neither's particularly welcoming to children, especially ones this young." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "Mrs. Morgan, I'd be happy to drive you into town or—" He hesitated, then continued with careful respect in his tone. "My sister lives at my ranch. She's a widow herself with a young boy. If you'd feel comfortable, you're welcome to stay with us until you sort things out. It'd be no trouble." Dawn studied him, searching for any sign of deception or ill intent. Instead, she saw only honest concern and a straightforward offer of help. The twins' cries grew more insistent, and her decision was made. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Hartley. I would be grateful for the ride to town, at least." "Perhaps the hotel will make an exception." Reese nodded, understanding her caution. "Let me help you with your things." He lifted her carpet bag easily, then hesitated, looking at the crying twins. "Would you allow me to help with one of the little ones? It's a bumpy road, and it might be easier if you're not holding both." Dawn felt a surge of protectiveness, but the practical reality of their situation won out. She had to trust someone, and this stranger with kind eyes seemed her best option. "Yes, thank you," she said, carefully transferring Rebecca into his unexpectedly capable arms. To her surprise, Rebecca's cries immediately softened as Reese cradled her with natural ease. "There now, little lady," he murmured. "We'll get you somewhere comfortable real soon." Dawn watched in amazement as her normally fussy daughter settled against the cowboy's chest. With gentle efficiency, Reese helped Dawn up onto the wagon's seat, handed Rebecca back, then carefully arranged a small area in the back of the wagon. "If you don't mind, madam, this might be more comfortable for you and the little ones. I put down some clean blankets and you'll be out of the sun." Dawn hesitated only briefly before climbing into the back of the wagon with the twins. Reese was right, it was more comfortable than the hard wooden seat, and the canvas cover provided much-needed shade. He helped her settle, ensuring she and the babies were secure before returning to the driver's seat. As the wagon pulled away from Willow Creek Station, Dawn felt equal measures of relief and trepidation. She was putting her trust and her children's safety in the hands of a stranger. Yet as she watched Reese Hartley's straight back and capable hands guiding the horses, she felt the first stirrings of hope since discovering Thomas's betrayal. Whatever lay ahead in this wild, unfamiliar territory, at least they were no longer alone on that abandoned platform, waiting for a man who would never come. The wagon rumbled along the rutted dirt road, swaying gently with each dip and rise of the terrain. Dawn cradled her twins, who had finally settled into exhausted sleep. Through the opening at the back of the canvas cover, she watched as the landscape changed from the flat expanse surrounding the station to rolling hills dotted with sage and scrub pine. "You doing all right back there, Mrs. Morgan?" Reese called over his shoulder, his voice carrying easily despite the wagon's creaks and the horse's steady hoofbeats. "Yes, thank you," Dawn replied, though her back ached and worry gnawed at her stomach. "How much farther to town?" "About 2 miles yet," he answered. "But I should mention something." He slowed the wagon slightly, turning his head so she could hear him better. "Town's pretty full up right now. Cattle buyers in from Denver, plus a group of men working on the new telegraph line. Hotels likely booked solid, and Ma Hadley's boarding house." He paused. "Well, she's particular about who she takes in." Dawn's heart sank. "I see." "My offer still stands," Reese said carefully. "My sister Sarah, she'd welcome the company. We've got plenty of room, and it would just be until you decide what you want to do next." Dawn hesitated, weighing her limited options. The thought of being turned away from the town's accommodations, standing in the street with 2 infants and nowhere to go, was terrifying. Yet accepting this stranger's hospitality felt dangerously close to admitting her complete helplessness. "Mr. Hartley," she began, "your kindness is appreciated, but I wouldn't want to impose. Perhaps there's a church in town, or a family who might take in boarders. Pastor Williams might help, that's true," Reese acknowledged. "But his house is small and his wife's been ailing. As for families taking boarders, none that I know would have space for a woman with 2 babies on no notice." He paused, then added gently, "Mrs. Morgan, I understand your caution. You don't know me from Adam. But I give you my word as a God-fearing man that you'll be safe at my ranch, and Sarah would skin me alive if I didn't bring you to her once she hears your situation." There was something in his voice, a simple honesty that resonated with Dawn. In the short time since meeting him, Reese Hartley had shown nothing but respect and kindness. The alternatives seemed increasingly bleak. "Very well, Mr. Hartley," she conceded. "If it's truly no imposition, I would be grateful for your hospitality, just until I can make other arrangements." "Good decision," he said, relief evident in his tone. "We'll still pass through town, need to pick up some supplies, and you might want a few things for yourself and the little ones." The wagon crested a hill, and suddenly the town of Willow Creek came into view, a collection of wooden buildings straddling both sides of a wide main street, with scattered residences visible on the outskirts. It was larger than Dawn had expected, though still modest compared to St. Louis. As they drew closer, Dawn could make out the various establishments: a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, what appeared to be a blacksmith shop, and various other businesses. People moved along the boardwalks or rode on horseback through the dusty street, and several wagons were hitched outside the general store. Reese guided the horses expertly through the busy thoroughfare, nodding greetings to several people who called out to him. Dawn felt acutely self-conscious, aware of curious glances directed toward the wagon. She smoothed her travel-rumpled dress and attempted to tidy her hair, which had come loose from its pins during the journey. "That's Wright's General Store," Reese said, pointing to a large 2-story building with a wide porch. "Best place to get whatever you might need. I'll stop there first." He brought the wagon to a halt in front of the store, setting the brake before jumping down. With the same gentle efficiency he'd shown earlier, he helped Dawn from the wagon, careful of the sleeping twins in her arms. "I can hold one of them while you go in, if you'd like," he offered. "Or I can fetch whatever you need while you stay with them." Dawn considered for a moment. The babies were finally peaceful, and waking them seemed cruel. Yet the thought of sending this man to purchase personal items for her was mortifying. "Perhaps if you wouldn't mind watching them for just a few minutes," she suggested hesitantly. "I need only the barest essentials, and they're finally resting," Reese nodded. "Of course, I'll stay right here with them." With obvious care, Dawn transferred the sleeping twins to his arms, watching as he settled them comfortably against his broad chest. Robert stirred briefly but didn't wake, while Rebecca remained completely at peace. "You're quite good with children," Dawn observed, surprised. A shadow passed briefly over Reese's features. "Had some practice," he said simply. "Take your time, Mrs. Morgan, we're in no rush." Inside the general store, Dawn quickly gathered the few necessities she could afford: a jar of preserved milk, some clean cloths for the babies, a small cake of soap, and a comb. The storekeeper, a portly man with friendly eyes, watched her hurried selections. "New to town, madam?" he asked as he totaled her purchases. "Just passing through," Dawn replied vaguely, counting out her precious coins. The storekeeper glanced toward the window where Reese could be seen holding the twins. "I see you've met Reese Hartley. Good man, Reese, one of the finest in the territory." Dawn looked up, surprised by the unsolicited endorsement. "You know him well, going on 10 years now," the man confirmed. "Helped him set up his ranch when he first came out here. No finer, more honest fellow you'll meet. He and his sister have had their share of hardships, but they've built something good out at Pine Ridge Ranch." He wrapped her purchases in brown paper. "If you're staying with them, you're in good hands." The storekeeper's words eased some of Dawn's anxiety. Outside, she found Reese quietly singing a lullaby to the twins, who remained peacefully asleep. Something about the sight this strong, capable man tenderly cradling her children touched Dawn unexpectedly. "All set?" Reese asked, looking up. "Yes, thank you," Dawn replied, taking her sleeping babies back into her arms. As they prepared to leave town, Dawn noticed people watching them with undisguised curiosity. A woman in a fine dress standing outside the millinery shop whispered to her companion while staring openly at Dawn and the twins. Two men lounging outside the saloon stopped their conversation to observe Reese helping her back into the wagon. "Don't mind them," Reese said quietly, noticing her discomfort. "Small town. Folks are just curious about newcomers." Dawn nodded, but the scrutiny intensified her feelings of vulnerability. What must they think of her, a woman with two infants, traveling with a man who wasn't her husband? In St. Louis, such an arrangement would have sparked immediate scandal. As if reading her thoughts, Reese added, "Out here, people understand that sometimes circumstances require bending social conventions. Life's too hard to survive without helping one another." The wagon pulled away from town, heading east along a different road than the one they'd traveled in on. The sun was beginning to set, painting the vast Wyoming sky in breathtaking shades of orange and pink. Despite her exhaustion and worry, Dawn couldn't help but be awed by the sheer beauty of the landscape. "It's about 3 miles to the ranch from here," Reese informed her. "We should arrive before dark. Sarah will have supper waiting, I expect." "I hope she won't be put out by unexpected guests," Dawn said anxiously. Reese's laugh was warm and genuine. "Sarah loves company, especially female company. Been just the two of us and her boy, Jamie, for too long. She'll be delighted." They traveled in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. As they rounded a bend in the road, a valley opened up before them, and in the distance, Dawn could make out buildings nestled against a backdrop of pine-covered hills. "Pine Ridge Ranch," Reese announced with quiet pride. "It's not grand, but it's home." As they drew closer, Dawn could see that while not grand, the ranch was impressive in its own right, a large main house built of sturdy logs, a well-constructed barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. Everything appeared neat and well-maintained, speaking to the care of its owners. A boy of about 10 ran out from the barn as they approached, waving excitedly. Behind him emerged a woman in her late 20s, wiping her hands on her apron. "That's Sarah and her son, Jamie," Reese explained. The wagon pulled up to the house, and Sarah approached, her curious expression transforming to one of concern as she took in the sight of Dawn and the twins. "Reese?" she questioned, her eyes moving from her brother to Dawn. Reese jumped down from the wagon and spoke quietly to his sister. Dawn couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw Sarah's expression soften with compassion. The woman immediately came to the wagon, her manner warm and welcoming. "Mrs. Morgan, I'm Sarah Winters, Reese's sister. Please come inside and rest. You must be exhausted from your journey." Dawn felt tears prick her eyes at the genuine kindness in Sarah's voice. "Thank you. I don't want to be a burden." "Nonsense," Sarah interrupted gently. "Any friend of Reese's is welcome here. Now let me help you with one of those precious babies. Jamie, come carry Mrs. Morgan's bag, please." With Sarah holding Rebecca and Dawn carrying Robert, they made their way into the house, Reese and Jamie following with Dawn's meager belongings. The interior was simple, but comfortable, clean, swept wooden floors, sturdy handmade furniture, colorful quilts and curtains that added warmth to the practical space. "We've got a spare bedroom just down the hall," Sarah explained, leading the way. "It's small, but there's a good bed and we can set up a cradle for the twins. It was Jamie's when he was a baby." The bedroom was indeed small but charming, with a window overlooking the eastern hills. A patchwork quilt covered the bed, and fresh wildflowers stood in a jar on the bedside table. "This is lovely," Dawn said sincerely. "Get settled, and I'll heat some water for you to wash up," Sarah offered. "Supper will be ready soon, but there's no rush. Come out when you and the little ones are ready." Left alone, Dawn sat on the edge of the bed, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. The kindness of these strangers contrasted sharply with her husband's betrayal. For the first time since discovering Thomas's abandonment, she allowed herself to cry quiet tears of relief, exhaustion, and lingering fear for the future. The twins began to stir, and Dawn quickly composed herself. Whatever happened next, she needed to be strong for her children. These people had offered sanctuary when she most needed it, and for that, she was profoundly grateful. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight, at least they were safe. As she gently tended to her babies, Dawn could hear the comforting sounds of the household Sarah moving about the kitchen, Jamie's boyish voice asking questions, and Reese's deep, reassuring responses. Through the open window came the evening sounds of the ranch horses nickering in the corral, the distant lowing of cattle, and the whisper of wind through the pines. For the first time since boarding that train in St. Louis with hopes of reuniting with her husband, Dawn felt a small measure of peace. This wasn't the life she had envisioned, but perhaps here, in this unexpected place among these kind strangers, she might find a way forward for herself and her children. The days that followed fell into a surprisingly comfortable rhythm. Dawn had initially planned to stay only a night or two, but when she tentatively raised the subject of moving to town, both Reese and Sarah insisted there was no rush. "The hotel's still full with those cattle buyers," Reese explained over breakfast on her third morning at Pine Ridge. "And frankly, Mrs. Morgan, it's no place for babies. Too noisy, too dusty." Sarah nodded in agreement, bouncing Rebecca on her knee. "Besides, I'm enjoying having another woman around, and these little ones." She smiled down at the baby girl. "Well, they're a pure delight." Dawn couldn't deny that the arrangement benefited everyone. The twins thrived in the clean mountain air and stable environment. Sarah, who had been managing the household alone while caring for Jamie and helping with ranch chores, welcomed Dawn's assistance. And Dawn herself felt useful for the first time in months, contributing to the household that had so generously taken them in. She insisted on earning her keep, rising early to help Sarah with breakfast, learning to manage the wood stove, and taking on much of the laundry and mending. The twins, now in their 7th month, were becoming more active, and Dawn found caring for them easier with Sarah's experienced help. "You're a natural with children," Dawn remarked one afternoon as she and Sarah hung laundry on the line behind the house. The older woman was entertaining Robert with a handmade toy while Dawn pinned sheets to the clothesline. Sarah's smile held a touch of sadness. "I always wanted a houseful. After Jamie was born, the doctor said there wouldn't be more. Then when my husband died in that mining accident 4 years ago, I figured that was that." She tickled Robert's cheek. "So having these little ones around is a blessing." Dawn hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. "Reese never married." Sarah gave her a knowing look. "No, though not for lack of interested parties. Half the unmarried women in the county have set their caps for him." She secured another clothespin. "There was someone years back, didn't end well." Before Dawn could inquire further, Jamie came running around the corner of the house, his face alight with excitement. "Ma, Aunt Dawn, Uncle Reese says I can help bring in the new calves today." Dawn felt a flutter in her chest at being called Aunt Dawn. It had started spontaneously a few days earlier, and neither she nor Sarah had corrected the boy. There was something touching about the casual inclusion into their family circle. "Did he now?" Sarah responded, hands on hips in mock seriousness. "And have you finished your lessons?" Jamie's face fell slightly. "Almost, just got the arithmetic left." "Then I suggest you get to it, young man. Those calves will still need bringing in after your sums are done." As Jamie dashed back to the house, Dawn smiled. "He's a wonderful boy. You've raised him well." "He's a good soul," Sarah agreed. "Reese has been like a father to him since my Thomas passed. Been good for both of them." Dawn felt a pang at the mention of the name Thomas, a reminder of her own husband's betrayal. She had written to her parents in St. Louis, informing them of Thomas's abandonment and her current situation. Their reply had been sympathetic but offered little practical help. They were elderly with limited means, and the journey west was beyond their capabilities. "You're thinking of him again," Sarah observed quietly. "Your husband," Dawn sighed. "Not with longing, just confusion, I suppose. How could he simply abandon his own children? I understand falling out of love with me, but them. Sarah squeezed her arm gently. Some men aren't meant to be fathers or husbands for that matter. You're better off without someone who'd leave you stranded like that. I know you're right, Dawn admitted. It's just difficult to imagine the future now. I came west believing I'd be joining my husband on a homestead, starting our life together. Now I'm alone with 2 babies and no clear path forward. You're not alone, Sarah said firmly. And as for a path forward, well, paths have a way of revealing themselves when you're ready to walk them. Later that afternoon, Dawn sat on the front porch with the twins napping in a makeshift cradle beside her, mending one of Reese's shirts. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention, and she looked up to see Reese riding in from the pasture, Jamie proudly seated in front of him on the saddle. Something about the sight, Reese's broad shoulders, his easy way with the boy, the genuine affection between them stirred emotions Dawn had been carefully suppressing. In the week since he'd found her at the train station, she'd come to respect Reese Hartley enormously. He worked from dawn until dusk, managing the ranch with quiet competence. He was kind to his sister and nephew, patient with Dawn's children, and unfailingly respectful toward Dawn herself. And she had to admit, he was handsome in a rugged, unassuming way that was entirely different from Thomas's polished charm. Reese's features were strong, his blue eyes direct and honest, his smile rare but transformative when it appeared. He spotted her on the porch and raised a hand in greeting. Dawn felt a warmth in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. She quickly looked down at her mending, chiding herself for such thoughts. She was a married woman, technically, abandoned or not, and Reese had shown no interest beyond neighborly kindness. That evening after supper, as Sarah and Jamie cleared the table, Reese approached Dawn with an uncharacteristic hesitancy. "Mrs. Morgan, I'll be heading into town tomorrow for supplies. I thought you might like to come along, perhaps speak with the pastor about your situation. He might have suggestions that would be helpful." Dawn considered the offer. She had been at Pine Ridge for a week now, and while the Hartleys' hospitality seemed genuine, she couldn't impose indefinitely. "That's very thoughtful. Yes, I should speak with someone about possibilities." The word felt hollow. What possibilities existed for a woman alone with infant twins in Frontier, Wyoming? "We'll leave after breakfast if that suits. Sarah's offered to keep the little ones here easier than bringing them into town." The thought of leaving her babies, even for a few hours, gave Dawn pause, but she nodded. "Thank you. I'll be ready." The next morning dawned clear and cool. Dawn dressed in her best remaining dress, a simple blue cotton that had seen better days but was at least presentable. Sarah helped her pin her hair, lending her a pretty ivory comb. "You look lovely," Sarah said approvingly. A far cry from that exhausted young woman Reese brought home a week ago. Dawn smiled ruefully. "I must have been a frightful sight." "You were a mother protecting her children," Sarah corrected. "Nothing frightful about that." She patted Dawn's hand. "Now, don't worry about these little ones. They'll be fine with their Auntie Sarah." Dawn kissed each twin, surprised at how calm she felt leaving them in Sarah's capable hands. "We won't be long," she promised, as much to herself as to her babies. Outside, Reese waited with the wagon. He'd traded his work clothes for a clean shirt and vest and had even trimmed his beard. When he saw Dawn, he removed his hat, a gesture of respect that touched her. "Mrs. Morgan, you look well this morning," he said, helping her onto the wagon seat. "Thank you, Mr. Hartley, and thank you for arranging this trip." The journey to town was pleasant. The June morning was beautiful, the landscape vibrant with early summer wildflowers. Reese pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area's history. Dawn found herself laughing at his dry humor and relaxing in his company in a way she hadn't with any man since before her marriage. Willow Creek was busy when they arrived, the main street crowded with wagons and riders. Reese guided their wagon to the general store, where he had business to conduct first. "Mr. Wright might know of work opportunities," Reese suggested as he helped Dawn down. "He keeps track of who's hiring in these parts." Inside the store, they were greeted warmly by the proprietor, who remembered Dawn from her brief visit the week before. "Mrs. Morgan, good to see you looking so well rested. I trust Pine Ridge is treating you kindly." "Very kindly, thank you," Dawn replied. "Mr. and Mrs. Winters have been most generous. While Reese discussed his order with Mr. Wright, Dawn browsed the store's offerings, making note of prices and calculating what sort of income she would need to support herself and the twins. The figures were daunting. "Excuse me," a female voice interrupted her thoughts. "You're the young woman staying out at Pine Ridge, aren't you?" Dawn turned to find an elegantly dressed older woman regarding her with undisguised curiosity. "Yes, temporarily. I'm Dawn Morgan." "Margaret Holloway," the woman replied. "My husband is the bank president." She looked Dawn over with an appraising eye. "I understand you arrived alone with 2 infants, most unusual." Dawn felt heat rise to her face at the woman's barely disguised insinuation. "My husband was to meet us, but there was a misunderstanding." "I see," Mrs. Holloway said in a tone that suggested she saw all too clearly. "And now you're staying with the Hartley family. How providential for you." Before Dawn could respond to the thinly veiled insult, Reese appeared at her side, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes hard as he addressed the banker's wife. "Mrs. Holloway, good morning. I see you've met Mrs. Morgan. We're just on our way to speak with Pastor Williams." "If you'll excuse us." Without waiting for a response, he placed a protective hand at the small of Dawn's back, guiding her toward the door. Once outside, Dawn released a shaky breath. "I'm sorry about that," Reese said quietly. "Mrs. Holloway fancies herself the arbiter of local morality. She thinks that we're." Dawn couldn't even finish the thought. "People will talk," Reese acknowledged. "It doesn't matter. Those who know me understand I'd never take advantage of someone in your situation." He paused. "But it does highlight why finding you a more permanent arrangement might be wise, for your reputation's sake." The reminder of her precarious position dampened Dawn's spirits as they walked to the small white church at the end of the main street. Pastor Williams, a kindly man in his 60s, welcomed them into his modest study. "Mrs. Morgan, Reese has told me something of your circumstances," the pastor said after initial pleasantries were exchanged. "I'm deeply sorry for the difficulty you find yourself in." "Thank you, Pastor. I'm seeking advice on how I might establish myself and provide for my children." The pastor's expression was sympathetic, but grave. "Employment options for a young mother are limited here. The school already has a teacher, and while the hotel might need help, the hours would be difficult with small children." He hesitated, then continued gently. "In situations like yours, women often consider remarriage as the most practical solution." Dawn felt a flutter of panic. "I'm not certain of my husband's whereabouts. I couldn't possibly. There are legal provisions," Pastor Williams explained. "After a certain period of abandonment, you could petition for divorce on grounds of desertion. Wyoming Territory has more progressive laws regarding such matters than many states." The conversation continued, outlining possible paths forward, none of which seemed particularly promising in the short term. The pastor promised to inquire among his congregation for suitable work and living arrangements, but Dawn left the meeting feeling more uncertain than ever. As they walked back toward the general store, Reese was unusually quiet. Finally, he stopped, turning to face her. "Mrs. Morgan, Dawn, if I may be so bold, I have a proposition to consider." His serious expression made her heart beat faster with apprehension. "What sort of proposition, Mr. Hartley?" Reese removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands. "Sarah and I have discussed this. We would like to offer you a permanent position at Pine Ridge as a housekeeper and helper to Sarah. You'd have your own room, board for you and the twins, and a small salary." Dawn stared at him, surprised by the unexpected offer. "That's very generous, but it would benefit us as well," Reese hurried to add. "Sarah has too much on her shoulders, and with the ranch expanding, she needs help. You've already proven yourself capable and hardworking." The practical part of Dawn recognized the wisdom of the arrangement. She had no immediate prospects, limited funds, and 2 babies to support. Pine Ridge offered safety, stability, and the company of people she had come to trust. Yet something held her back, perhaps pride, or the lingering sense that accepting would somehow make her abandonment by Thomas more final, more real. "May I think about it?" she asked finally. "Of course," Reese said, replacing his hat. "There's no rush." "You're welcome at Pine Ridge for as long as you need," regardless of your decision. They completed their errands in companionable silence, loading supplies into the wagon before beginning the journey back to the ranch. As they left town, Dawn noticed Mrs. Holloway and several other women watching their departure from the steps of the millinery shop, their expressions a mixture of disapproval and speculation. "I fear I'm damaging your family's reputation by staying with you," Dawn said worriedly. Reese's laugh was short and without humor. "Mrs. Morgan, my family's reputation has weathered far worse than giving shelter to a mother and her children. People will talk, then they'll find something else to talk about. That's the way of small towns." Dawn studied his profile, sensing there was more to the story. "You speak from experience." Reese was quiet for so long that Dawn thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "Sarah mentioned there was someone years ago." Dawn nodded. "She said it didn't end well. That's putting it mildly." Reese's hands tightened on the reins. "Her name was Charlotte. Daughter of a rancher from over by Laramie. We were engaged to be married. 2 weeks before the wedding, she ran off with a gambler passing through town." His voice remained steady, but Dawn could hear the old pain beneath the words. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "That must have been difficult." "It was, at the time, pride more than heart looking back, but it taught me something about gossip. For months, folks whispered about what I might have done to drive her away or how I must not have been man enough to keep her." He shrugged. "Eventually, they found new stories to tell. Now it's just something that happened a long time ago." Dawn thought about her own situation, abandoned by her husband, left alone with 2 babies. Would that eventually become just something that happened, a story that lost its power to hurt her? "The difference," Reese continued, as if reading her thoughts, "is that Charlotte chose to leave. Your husband's the one who walked away. You stayed for your children. That takes a kind of courage most folks respect, whether they show it or not." His words settled over Dawn like a warm blanket, easing some of the shame she'd been carrying since realizing Thomas's betrayal. She had stayed. She had fought for her children, and she would continue to do whatever was necessary to give them a good life. As Pine Ridge came into view, with its sturdy buildings and beautiful setting against the mountains, Dawn felt a sense of coming home that surprised her. In just a week, this place had become more of a true home than anywhere she'd lived since her childhood. Sarah and Jamie were on the porch waiting for them, the twins contentedly playing on a blanket nearby. The scene was so domestic, so peaceful that Dawn felt tears prick her eyes. Perhaps Reese's offer wasn't just the practical choice, but the right one in every way. Here, her children could grow up in fresh air and open spaces, with good people who already cared for them. Here, Dawn herself might find not just shelter, but purpose and belonging. As Reese helped her down from the wagon, his hand strong and steady around her waist, Dawn made her decision. She would stay at Pine Ridge Ranch, at least for now. The future beyond that remained uncertain, but for the first time since standing alone on that train platform, Dawn felt a flicker of genuine hope. The seasons changed, summer yielding to fall, and fall giving way to the first snows of winter. Dawn's temporary stay at Pine Ridge Ranch had evolved into a comfortable permanence that benefited everyone. She had accepted Reese and Sarah's offer of employment, taking over much of the household management, while Sarah focused on her talented needlework, which had begun bringing in additional income from town. The twins thrived in the ranch environment. At 11 months, they were crawling everywhere, their personalities becoming more distinct with each passing day. Robert was serious and methodical, carefully examining everything before attempting it. Rebecca was fearless and curious, always the first to explore new territory. Both adored Jamie, who had appointed himself their official protector and entertainer. Dawn herself had blossomed as well. The fresh air and physical work had brought color to her cheeks and strength to her body. She had learned to ride, to milk cows, to manage the kitchen garden, and even to shoot a rifle, a skill Reese insisted everyone on the ranch should possess. "You never know when you might need to scare off a wolf or coyote," he'd explained as he patiently taught her to load, aim, and fire the weapon. Her relationship with Reese had developed into a friendship built on mutual respect and growing affection. He treated her with unfailing courtesy, never overstepping the boundaries of propriety, yet Dawn sometimes caught him watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. On those occasions, she would remind herself firmly of her still married status and the complications it presented. Pastor Williams had been helping her navigate the legal process of obtaining a divorce based on abandonment, but Wyoming territorial law required a waiting period that wouldn't be satisfied until spring. Until then, Dawn remained technically married to a man who had discarded her and their children without a backward glance. As Christmas approached, excitement filled the ranch house. For Jamie's sake, they were determined to make the holiday special, despite the isolation imposed by heavy December snows. Sarah and Dawn sewed gifts in secret, while Reese disappeared into his workshop to craft wooden toys for the twins and a special surprise for his nephew. 2 days before Christmas, Reese and Jamie rode into town for last-minute supplies and mail, returning just before dusk with rosy cheeks and snow-dusted clothing. "Letters for you, Aunt Dawn," Jamie announced, proudly presenting her with several envelopes. "From St. Louis." Dawn thanked him, setting aside the letters from her parents to read later. But the third envelope, addressed in an unfamiliar hand, drew her immediate attention. Opening it at the kitchen table, she read quickly, her expression changing from curiosity to shock. "What is it?" Sarah asked, noting Dawn's pallor. "It's from a lawyer in St. Louis," Dawn said, her voice unsteady. "Thomas is dead." Reese, who had been hanging his coat by the door, crossed the room in 3 long strides. "Are you all right?" Dawn nodded mechanically, still staring at the letter. "He died in a saloon fight 2 months ago. The lawyer is settling his estate and found my parents' address among his papers." She looked up, her eyes meeting Reese's. "There is no estate, of course, just debts." Sarah gently took the letter, reading it for herself. "It says here they found evidence he was married twice before you, Dawn, neither properly dissolved." "A bigamist," Dawn whispered, the full implication hitting her. "My marriage was never legal." The room fell silent except for the twins' happy babbling as they played on a blanket near the fire, blissfully unaware of the revelation that had just upended their mother's world. Jamie, sensing the adults' tension, asked uncertainly, "Is this bad news, Aunt Dawn?" Dawn looked at the boy's concerned face, then at her innocent babies, then finally at Reese, whose expression revealed nothing of his thoughts. Was it bad news that the man who had abandoned her and her children was dead, that the marriage she had believed in had been a lie from the start? "No, Jamie," she said finally, "it's not bad news, it's just surprising." She managed a small smile. "Would you help me set the table for supper? I think we could all use a hot meal." During the meal, conversation was kept deliberately light, focused on Christmas preparations and ranch matters. Only after Jamie had gone to bed and the twins were asleep did the adults gather around the fire to discuss the implications of the letter. "So legally, you were never married," Sarah summarized, pouring tea for the 3 of them, "which means the twins are illegitimate in the eyes of the law," Dawn finished quietly, "though Thomas is listed as their father on their birth certificates. That could be amended," Reese suggested, his first contribution to the conversation. Since the marriage was fraudulent, Dawn shook her head. "He was still their father, regardless of the legality of our union. I wouldn't erase that, however much he failed them." She stared into the fire, emotions warring within her. "I keep thinking I should feel something more about his death, grief perhaps, or anger, but all I feel is relief." She looked up guiltily. "That's terrible, isn't it?" "It's honest," Reese said. "And understandable. He hurt you, Dawn. He abandoned you and your children. You're allowed to feel relief that he can never hurt you again." Sarah touched Dawn's hand gently. "This changes things for you, you know. Legally, you're free. No need for divorce proceedings now." The realization sent a jolt through Dawn. She was free. Unencumbered by a fraudulent marriage, free to make decisions about her future without the shadow of Thomas Morgan hanging over her. She glanced at Reese, who was watching her with that unreadable expression again. What was he thinking? Did this news change anything between them? As if sensing her thoughts, Reese cleared his throat. "It's been a long day, and tomorrow we'll be busy with Christmas preparations." "Perhaps we should all get some rest," Dawn nodded, grateful for the suggestion. She needed time to process this unexpected development, to understand what it meant for her and her children's future. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay awake, listening to the twins' soft breathing from their cradle, thinking about the strange path that had led her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had stood abandoned at a train station, desperate and alone. Now she was here, in this warm house with people who had become more family to her than the man she had mistakenly married ever was. And then there was Reese. Strong, steady, honorable Reese, who had loaded her and her babies into his wagon that day without hesitation. Who had opened his home and, she sometimes dared to think, perhaps his heart as well. What possibilities might now exist that hadn't before? Christmas Eve dawned bright and clear, the world outside transformed into a glistening white wonderland. The day was filled with festive preparations, baking, decorating, wrapping the simple gifts they had made for one another. Dawn threw herself into the activities, pushing aside thoughts of Thomas and the complications his death presented. That evening, after a special supper, they gathered in the sitting room where Reese had set up a small pine tree, decorated with paper ornaments, candles, and strings of cranberries and popcorn that Jamie had proudly created. They sang carols, read the Christmas story from the Bible, and exchanged gifts, delighting in each other's pleasure. For the twins, Reese had carved beautiful wooden animals, a bear for Robert and a deer for Rebecca. Jamie received the longed-for pocketknife he had been eyeing in the general store catalog, along with strict instructions for its proper use. Sarah was moved to tears by the fine woolen shawl Dawn had sewn for her, embroidered with delicate flowers. When it came time for Dawn's gift, Reese handed her a small, carefully wrapped package. Inside, she found a silver locket on a delicate chain. "Open it," he encouraged softly. Dawn did, gasping when she saw the tiny portraits inside, perfect miniatures of Robert and Rebecca, painted with remarkable skill. "How did you?" she began, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Sarah helped with the likenesses," Reese explained. "And I rode to Cheyenne last month to have a jeweler there do the actual painting. I thought you should have something permanent to keep them close to your heart." Dawn was speechless, tears welling in her eyes. It was the most personal, most meaningful gift she had ever received. Without thinking, she leaned forward and kissed Reese's cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's perfect." The moment hung between them, intimate and charged with unspoken feelings. Sarah, perceptive as always, rose to her feet. "I think it's time for hot chocolate before bed," she announced. "Jamie, would you help me in the kitchen?" As they left the room, Dawn became acutely aware of being alone with Reese, something that rarely happened despite their months of living under the same roof. He took the locket from her hands and gestured for her to turn around. "May I?" he asked. Dawn nodded, gathering her hair to one side as Reese placed the chain around her neck, his fingers warm against her skin as he fastened the clasp. When she turned back to face him, he was closer than she expected, his blue eyes intent on her face. "Dawn," he began, his voice deeper than usual. "I've been wanting to speak with you even before this news about Thomas." Her heart began to race. "Yes, these past months, having you and the twins here, it's changed things, changed me." He took a deep breath. "I know it's too soon after learning about Thomas, and I don't want to press you when you're still processing everything. But I need you to know that the sound of breaking glass from the kitchen interrupted him, followed by Jamie's anxious "Sorry, Ma," the moment shattered. Reese stepped back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I should go help them," he said reluctantly. Dawn nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course." But as he turned to go, she caught his hand. "Reese, whatever you were going to say, I'd still like to hear it." "Perhaps tomorrow." His smile returned, warm and full of promise. "Tomorrow," he agreed. Tomorrow, however, brought unexpected challenges. Dawn woke to find Rebecca burning with fever, her usual energy replaced by listless whimpering. By midday, Robert had developed the same symptoms: high temperature, congestion, and a worrying rattle in his tiny chest. All thoughts of personal matters were set aside as the household mobilized to care for the sick infants. Sarah prepared herbal remedies passed down through generations, while Reese rode through the snow to fetch the doctor from town, a journey that would take hours in the treacherous conditions. By nightfall, both twins were seriously ill, their labored breathing terrifying Dawn. She sat between their cradles, applying cool compresses to their foreheads, singing softly through her tears, praying as she had never prayed before. Sarah stayed with her, offering silent support and practical help. "Children get sick, Dawn," she said gently. "They're strong babies. They'll fight this." But Dawn couldn't shake the fear that gripped her heart. What if she lost them? These precious lives that had kept her going through abandonment and hardship, how could she bear it if they were taken from her now? It was past midnight when Reese finally returned with Dr. Peterson, an elderly man with kind eyes and a reassuring manner. He examined the twins thoroughly, his expression grave but not hopeless. "Lung inflammation," he diagnosed. "Not uncommon in winter, especially in children this young, but they're otherwise healthy, which works in their favor." He left medicines and detailed instructions, promising to return in 2 days if the weather permitted. As he prepared to leave, he pulled Dawn aside. "Mrs. Morgan, you should prepare yourself. These next 48 hours will be critical. Do everything I've instructed and pray." He patted her hand. That's all any of us can do sometimes. After the doctor departed, Dawn returned to her vigilance beside the twins' cradles. Reese brought a chair for her, then surprised her by pulling up another for himself. "You should rest," Dawn protested weakly. "You've been riding for hours in the cold." "I'm staying," he said simply. "We'll watch over them together." Through that long night, they maintained their vigil, taking turns applying the doctor's remedies, bathing the twins' fevered bodies with cool water, holding them when they cried. They spoke little, communicating more through shared glances and the careful coordination of their efforts. Dawn observed Reese's tenderness with her children, the gentle way he held Rebecca, his large hands so careful with her tiny form, how he sang softly to Robert, old cowboy songs that somehow soothed the fussy baby. This man, who had no biological connection to her children, treated them with a father's love. As dawn broke on December 26th, bringing weak winter sunlight through the window, Rebecca's fever finally broke. Hours later, Robert's followed. By evening, both babies were sleeping peacefully, their breathing easier, their cheeks less flushed. The crisis had passed. Dawn, exhausted beyond words, found herself weeping with relief as she cradled first one, then the other, marveling at their resilience. "You should sleep now," Reese urged, his own face haggard from the night's vigil. "Sarah and I will watch them. You've been awake for nearly 2 days." Dawn knew he was right. She could barely keep her eyes open. Still, she hesitated. "Promise you'll wake me if there's any change." "I promise," Reese said solemnly, "but there won't be. They're past the worst of it now." Reluctantly, Dawn allowed herself to be led to her bedroom, where she collapsed fully clothed onto the bed. She was asleep almost before Reese closed the door behind him. When she woke, disoriented, the room was dark except for a single lamp burning low. Sarah sat in a rocking chair by the window, one of the twins, Robert, Dawn realized sleeping peacefully in her arms. "What time is it?" Dawn asked, sitting up quickly. "Just past midnight," Sarah replied softly. "You've slept about 6 hours. The babies are doing much better. Rebecca's with Reese in the kitchen. She was getting fussy and he thought you needed more rest." Dawn rubbed her eyes, relief washing over her anew at the sight of her son's peaceful face. "Thank you for watching them," Sarah smiled. "It's no hardship. I've grown to love these little ones as if they were my own." She hesitated, then added, "Reese too." Dawn met the other woman's knowing gaze. "Sarah, you don't need to explain," Sarah interrupted gently. "I've seen how you look at each other." "I've been hoping for it, truth be told." "You have?" Dawn asked, surprised. Sarah nodded. "My brother deserves happiness, so do you, and these children deserve a father who will cherish them." She rose, carefully transferring the sleeping Robert to Dawn's arms. "I'll go check on Rebecca." Left alone with her son, Dawn gazed down at his peaceful face, thinking about Sarah's words. Yes, her children deserved a loving father. And in the past 6 months, Reese had shown himself to be exactly that: patient, kind, protective, and genuinely invested in their well-being. As for her own feelings, Dawn could no longer deny, even to herself, that what had begun as gratitude had grown into something much deeper. She had fallen in love with Reese Hartley, his strength, his integrity, his quiet ways, the tenderness he showed her children, the respect he showed her. But was it fair to burden him with a ready-made family, to ask him to take on children who weren't his own? Thomas's death had freed her legally, but the complications of her situation remained. The door opened quietly, and Reese entered with Rebecca cradled against his shoulder, fast asleep. "She finally settled," he whispered, carefully placing the baby girl in her cradle. "How's our boy doing, our boy?" The casual possessive sent a warm flutter through Dawn's chest. She placed Robert in his own cradle before turning to face Reese. "Better. They're both better, thanks to you. If you hadn't brought the doctor when you did." "You don't need to thank me, Dawn," Reese said, his voice low in the quiet room. "I would do anything for those children." He paused, his eyes holding hers in the lamplight. "For you too." The conversation they had almost had on Christmas Eve hung between them, waiting to be resumed. Dawn took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Reese, about what you were going to say yesterday before the twins got sick." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the fatigue in his face, the stubble darkening his jaw, the intensity in his blue eyes. "I was going to say that I love you, Dawn Morgan. I think I've loved you since that first day at the train station when you stood there so brave and alone, trying to protect your babies." His voice was steady, but she could hear the emotion beneath the words. "I've tried to keep my distance to respect your situation, but now that Thomas is gone." He hesitated. "I need to know if there's any chance you might someday feel for me what I feel for you." Dawn's heart soared at his declaration, at the naked vulnerability in his expression. All her doubts and fears seemed to fade in the face of this man's honest love. "Reese," she whispered, reaching for his hand. "I already do." The joy that transformed his tired face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He drew her gently into his arms, one hand cradling the back of her head as he looked down at her with wonder. "I never thought I'd find this again," he murmured. "Never thought I'd want to." "Nor I," Dawn admitted. "After Thomas, I couldn't imagine trusting any man again, but you're nothing like him. You're good and true and honorable." Reese's thumb traced the curve of her cheek with exquisite tenderness. "I want to build a life with you, Dawn, with you and the twins. I want to be a father to them, to give them my name, to raise them as my own." Tears filled Dawn's eyes at his words. "You already are a father to them in all the ways that matter. They adore you. And I them," he said simply. "But I want to make it official. I want to make us a family if you'll have me." Dawn's answer was in her eyes, in the way she leaned into his touch, in the love that had blossomed between them through months of shared work and purpose and caring. When Reese lowered his head and kissed her, gentle and reverent, it felt like coming home, like the culmination of a journey that had begun on that lonely train platform 6 months before. The kiss deepened, tender yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. When they finally parted, both breathless, Reese rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Dawn," he whispered. "Be my wife, let me be a father to your children, let us be a family together." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." From the doorway came a poorly suppressed sound of delight. They turned to find Sarah watching them, tears shining in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, not looking sorry at all. "I just came to check on the babies." Reese laughed, keeping one arm around Dawn's waist. "Well, sister, it seems you'll be gaining a sister-in-law and 2 more nieces and nephews. If that meets with your approval," Sarah crossed the room to embrace them both. "It's all I've been praying for these past months," she admitted. "Now, you both need rest." The twins are on the mend, and there will be plenty of time for making plans tomorrow. After Sarah left, Reese kissed Dawn once more, softly and sweetly. "Get some sleep," he urged. "I'll watch over the little ones tonight." "We'll watch over them together," Dawn countered. "That's what parents do." His smile at her words was radiant. "Together, then, tonight and all the nights to come." As they settled into chairs beside the twins' cradles, hands linked between them, Dawn marveled at the twists of fate that had brought her here. Thomas's betrayal, the abandonment at the train station, the chance meeting with Reese, all of it had led to this moment. This newfound happiness that felt both miraculous and completely right. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing Pine Ridge Ranch in pristine white. Inside, a new family had formed, born of hardship and kindness, cemented by love and choice rather than blood or obligation. For Dawn, it was the gift she had never dared to hope for: a true home, a loving partner, and the promise of a future filled with purpose and belonging. The wedding took place in April, when the Wyoming landscape was coming alive with the first vibrant green of spring. Pastor Williams performed the ceremony in the Pine Ridge Ranch garden, where Sarah had coaxed early wildflowers into bloom. The congregation was small but meaningful. Sarah and Jamie, of course, Dr. Peterson and his wife, Mr. Wright from the general store and his family, a few neighboring ranchers with whom Reese had built friendships over the years, and, to Dawn's surprise and delight, her parents, who had made the long journey from St. Louis after receiving Reese's letter inviting them to the wedding. The twins, now 15 months old and sturdy on their feet, participated in their own way, Robert solemnly carrying a small pillow with the rings, with Jamie's careful guidance, and Rebecca scattering flower petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Dawn wore a simple dress of ivory silk that Sarah had helped her sew, and carried a bouquet of spring flowers tied with blue ribbon. But it was Reese who took her breath away, standing tall and handsome in a new suit, his face alight with joy and love as he watched her approach on her father's arm. When they joined hands before the pastor, Dawn felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Williams began, his voice carrying clearly in the spring air, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Reese James Hartley and Dawn Elizabeth Morgan." The traditional words washed over Dawn as she stood facing the man who had rescued her, in every sense of the word, the man who had opened his home and his heart to her and her children, who had shown her what true love and partnership could be. When it came time for their vows, Reese's voice was steady and sure. "Dawn, when I found you at that train station last summer, I had no idea I was finding my future, my happiness, my home. You've brought light and laughter back into my life, and the gift of 2 beautiful children to love. I promise to cherish you all the days of my life, to be a faithful husband to you and a loving father to Robert and Rebecca. I will stand beside you through whatever life brings, and I will thank God every day for leading me to that station at exactly the right moment." Tears blurred Dawn's vision as she spoke her own vows. "Reese, you took a chance on a stranger with 2 babies when others turned away. You offered shelter when I needed it most, respect when I'd forgotten my own worth, and love when I'd stopped believing it existed. I promise to be a faithful wife, a partner in all things, to build our family and our ranch together with love and purpose. My heart is yours now and always." The exchange of rings, the pastor's pronouncement, the kiss that sealed their union all seemed to happen in a beautiful dream. It wasn't until she heard the cheers and applause of their small gathering that Dawn fully realized. She was Mrs. Reese Hartley now, and the journey that had begun in abandonment had led to this moment of complete belonging. The celebration afterward was simple but joyous, a feast prepared by Sarah, music provided by a neighboring rancher on fiddle and his wife on piano, dancing in the cleared space of the ranch house's main room. Dawn danced with her new husband, with her father, with Jamie, who was very serious about getting the steps right, and even with little Robert in her arms, while Reese danced with Rebecca. As the afternoon lengthened toward evening, Dawn found a quiet moment with her parents on the porch. "Are you happy, daughter?" her father asked, his weathered face creased with emotion. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Dawn answered truthfully. Her mother squeezed her hand. "He's a good man. Anyone can see how he loves you and the children." "He is," Dawn agreed, watching through the window as Reese swung Rebecca high in the air, her daughter's delighted laughter visible even from a distance. "He loves them as if they were his own blood." "They are his in all the ways that matter," her father said wisely. "Family is more than blood, Dawn. It's choice and commitment and love." He paused, his expression growing serious. "Your mother and I, we worried when you married Thomas. We saw things in him that concerned us, but you seemed so certain." "I was young and foolish," Dawn admitted. "I mistook charm for character." "And now?" her mother asked. Dawn smiled, watching as Reese set Rebecca down to scoop up Robert for his turn. "Now I understand that true character shows itself in daily actions, in how a person treats others when there's nothing to gain." Reese has shown me his character every day since we met." Later that night, after the guests had departed and the twins were asleep in what was now officially their nursery, Dawn and Reese stood on the porch of their home, his arm around her waist as they gazed at the star-filled Wyoming sky. "Mrs. Hartley," Reese murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Dawn replied, leaning into his embrace. "It feels right, like it was always meant to be." "Perhaps it was," Reese suggested. "I've never been one to believe much in fate, but what are the chances I'd arrive at that station at exactly the moment you needed someone?" Dawn turned in his arms to face him. "Divine providence, my mother would call it. Your mother is a wise woman." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. "I have something for you, a wedding gift." From his pocket, he produced a folded document which he placed in her hands. Dawn opened it curiously, then gasped as she realized what she was holding: adoption papers. She whispered, scanning the legal document that would make Robert and Rebecca legally Reese's children. "If you approve," Reese said. "I've spoken with Judge Foster. He's prepared to process them whenever we're ready. The twins would legally be Hartleys, just like their mother." Tears filled Dawn's eyes for what felt like the 100th time that day. "You've already been their father in every way that matters, but this—" She clutched the papers to her chest. "This is the greatest gift you could give them. Give us." "They're the greatest gift I've ever received," Reese said simply. "You three changed my life, Dawn. Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions. The ranch was doing well, but there was an emptiness in me that I'd grown accustomed to." His blue eyes were solemn in the moonlight. "You filled that emptiness. You made this place a true home again." Dawn reached up to touch his face, her heart overflowing with love for this man who had become everything to her. "I love you, Reese Hartley. And I love you, Dawn Hartley, more than words can say." His kiss was tender at first, then increasingly passionate, a promise of the night to come there first as husband and wife. When they finally parted, breathless, Reese took her hand. "Come, wife, let's go to bed." As he led her inside, Dawn cast one last glance at the star-filled sky, offering a silent prayer of gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought Reese to that train station last summer, for the kindness that had prompted him to load her and her babies into his wagon, for the journey that had led to this moment of perfect happiness. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together not as a woman abandoned, but as a family united by choice and bound by love. 5 years later, Dawn Hartley stood on the porch of Pine Ridge Ranch, watching as the autumn sun cast golden light across the expanded property that she and Reese had built into one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory. The last of the summer flowers still bloomed in her garden, their colors vivid against the weathered logs of the house that had become her true home. From the corral came the sound of children's laughter. Dawn smiled as she watched her husband leading a gentle pony in a circle. 6-year-old twins Robert and Rebecca taking turns riding, while 4-year-old James William Hartley, their first child together, waited impatiently for his turn. Baby Elizabeth Sarah, just beginning to toddle at 14 months, clutched Dawn's skirts, watching her siblings with wide blue eyes that matched her father's. "Mama, look," Rebecca called, waving proudly from her perch on the pony's back. "I'm riding all by myself." "I see you, sweetheart." Dawn called back. "You're doing wonderfully." Rebecca's dark curls bounced as she straightened her shoulders, already showing the confidence and determination that had characterized her from infancy. Robert, ever the more cautious twin, watched his sister carefully, mentally preparing for his own turn. Though physically identical with their dark hair and brown eyes, Thomas's coloring the twins had developed distinctly different personalities. What they shared, however, was the complete security of being loved. Reese had formally adopted them 3 years ago, and while they knew the story of their birth father told in age-appropriate terms, they had never known any father but Reese. To them, he was simply Pa, the center of their world, the man who taught them to ride and fish and recognize animal tracks, who read them stories at night and said prayers with them, who loved them with unwavering devotion. The past 5 years had brought changes to Pine Ridge Ranch. With Dawn's encouragement, Reese had expanded their cattle operation and added sheep, a somewhat controversial decision among traditional cattlemen, but one that had proved profitable. Sarah had married Dr. Peterson's son Michael 2 years ago, and they lived in a new house just down the road, where Sarah continued her needlework business and Michael ran a successful horse breeding operation. Jamie, now 15, was Reese's right-hand man on the ranch, showing a natural aptitude for the business side of ranching that complemented Reese's practical skills. Dawn herself had found unexpected fulfillment beyond motherhood and ranch life. When Willow Creek schoolteacher had fallen ill 2 years ago, Dawn had stepped in temporarily, drawing on her own education. The temporary position had become permanent, with Dawn teaching 3 days a week while Sarah cared for little Elizabeth. Her classroom now included children from throughout the area, including her own twins, who were proving to be bright, eager students. Life wasn't perfect, of course. There had been hardships: a difficult pregnancy with James, a drought that threatened their cattle, a severe winter that isolated them for weeks. But through it all, Dawn and Reese had faced challenges together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Hartley," came Reese's voice, interrupting her reflections. He had handed the pony's lead to Jamie and joined her on the porch, scooping up little Elizabeth, who squealed in delight. "Just counting my blessings," Dawn replied, leaning into his side as his arm circled her waist, "and thinking about how far we've come." Reese followed her gaze to their children. Robert was now on the pony, riding with careful concentration while Rebecca called out encouragement. James hopped from foot to foot, eager for his turn. "From that train station to this," Reese mused. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it myself." Dawn turned in his embrace, looking up at the face she loved so well, more weathered now than when they'd met, with laugh lines around his eyes and a touch of silver at his temples, but still handsome, still the face that made her heart quicken after all these years. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. Taking on a woman with 2 babies that day, Reese's expression softened as he gazed down at her. "Dawn Hartley, that was the best decision I ever made, and I'd make it again every day for the rest of my life." He leaned down to kiss her, a gesture that still held all the tenderness of their first kiss. Elizabeth giggled between them, patting their faces with her tiny hands. "Pa, Ma, look at me," James called from the corral, where Jamie was now holding him on the pony's back. "We're watching, son." Reese called back, his arm tightening around Dawn's waist. As the sun began to set over Pine Ridge Ranch, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Dawn offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here, from abandonment to belonging, from solitude to family, from despair to joy. That day at Willow Creek Station, when a cowboy had loaded her and her babies into his wagon, hadn't been an ending after all. It had been the beginning of a love story more beautiful than she could have imagined, written across the wide, open spaces of Wyoming and in the hearts of the family they had built together. A love story that, Dawn knew with absolute certainty, would continue to unfold for all the days of their lives.